Right. Morning, everyone. It seems that we have a lot of people joined us this morning. Welcome to this morning's webinar. My name is Max Pischlik. My colleague Ivana Abreu, who's based in Cape Town, at her home in quarantine, is supporting me during the moderation. Hi there. I want to thank you all for coming. And thank you for Ivana for supporting this. We're going to start the next 20 to 30 seconds. It looks like we have a massive list of people joining us every second right now. 41, 42 people currently. I wanted to thank everyone for registering to this morning's session. We had over 165 registrations. And yeah, it's unbelievable, the feedback. So I had a few sleepless nights to try and make sure that I was able to support you folks through what everyone's going through in their lives, and I hope the session is very supportive to all of you. Perhaps a few little housekeeping issues before we kick off. I wanted to firstly just introduce to everyone Livestorm. This is probably the first time they're using this webinar system. It's relatively recent for us too, so we're still testing it. Just so you know, what you will see on the right-hand side are panels where already some people have begun to chat. That's wonderful. Hi, folks. If everyone can maybe test the chat function, on the right panel under chat and say hi and just give us a sense of where you're coming from or where you're based, what a country or city that you're dialing in from. That'll be wonderful. I hope this is a Pan-African or even pan-continental. We've got people coming in from Saka, from the Kelders. Hi, Martin, I guess from Cape Town, Joburg. Thank you for all joining. As you'll notice, the chat function we'll be using throughout the morning as a test for us. We'll also be taking your questions during the course of today. Ivana has wonderfully agreed to help manage some of the questions. And you'll notice next to the chat function, we will be able to take questions and then moderate questions throughout the session. We might test, we don't know yet, we might test for some of you to even ask your questions on the webinar and invite you through, but we just need to kind of get a sense of how the session's going and how it filters through. Yes, thank you for everyone. Mozambique, we've people from the West Coast, we've got Razan from Lisbon in Portugal, Cairo in Egypt. So thank you for also all my African colleagues joining from all over the continent. It's wonderful to have a Pan-African webinar. So next to obviously chat, we have questions. I would also ask you quickly to test out the polls. I'm publishing a poll now. I'm just going to be asking you what you're wearing on your feet. And you can tell me very quickly on the poll section what you're wearing. Some people wearing nothing, a lot, wonderful. We're in quarantine, we don't need to be wearing shoes right now. So please test the polls out and quickly real time add in that. You also notice the people section on the far right. So, when we want to take questions, we might enable you to come on stage. Ivana's on stage with me right now. And currently, we currently have 55 people joined of the 160. So yeah, I think we're ready to go. So the session is scheduled for 2 hours. I've taken quite a bit of time to look at all of your registration forms to see what you're interested in. And it's a really broad interest around resilience. And what was quite difficult for me in this presentation was resilience and psychological resilience, or what I call psychophysical resilience, is a really broad subject. So for the sake of the session and with so much to cover, I'm really going to try and chop it down and really focus. So this session, folks, you'll see a lot of information on social media coming out around business strategy and how to deal with business decisions during very uncertain times that we're in right now. In this session, I feel what hasn't been covered, and the reason why I wanted to cover it, is before we make decisions during this time, really understanding and getting to grips with aspects of our psyche and all the uncertainty we're feeling in our thoughts, emotions, fears, are some of the groundswell that I think is worth contemplating before we make decisions. Because if we're making decisions from a certain place, it informs the outcome at the end of it. And I notice a lot of people in our work are really struggling with that right now. And so this session is primarily geared to psychological resilience. We will do future sessions which are more focused on the business aspects, because I know a lot of our portfolio companies, investees, and accelerators are really struggling out during this time, and they've seen huge amounts of both decimation and opportunities coming their way. So, but we can only tackle one thing at a time during these small sessions. So, developing entrepreneurial resilience during turbulent times. I just want to reintroduce myself. My name is Max Pischlik. I'm a partner at Impact Amplifier, and I'm the CEO of Green Fingers Mobile. I have the luck and displeasure of coming from venture creation from a number of different perspectives. Impact Amplifier work is primarily in helping highly impactful, scalable impact ventures throughout Africa get access to capital. And our teams work across the continent, but primarily we were there working with large funders and working with entrepreneurs and helping them access capital. So in some way, I get a lot of, I play the role of having an objective role or third party. At the same time, I also am the CEO of Green Fingers Mobile. And Green Fingers Mobile is an agri-tech business, which is primarily a digital farmer management tool in agriculture in Africa. So in some ways, with that hat, I also wear the venture hat. And both, I'm an entrepreneur through and through. Both Impact Amplifier and Green Fingers Mobile are businesses. But then we also play the investor view too. So we advise a lot of investors before this time since 2011, all the way currently through this COVID situation right now. And I hope I can provide some layer of insight across holding the perspective in some way as an advisory capacity for ventures, to both ventures and funders, being a CEO of a technology company or an impact-focused technology company in agriculture in Africa, and wearing the hat of the investor. And I think a lot of the contextualization of psychological resilience in this session is going to be contextualized around those three perspectives. Perhaps before we jump into the session, there are just a couple house rules that I want to go through. Please, folks, the session is for you. It's a new format for me too, having a lot of engagement. I would deliver this content face-to-face with people in a room, so I could sense their reaction. So there are really no stupid questions. Because you can't shout with your voice, that blipping sound of questions or chats, particularly if we can use the question section for questions, rather than the chat, just because the chat moves so quickly, please shout out with your questions. Yvonne is going to be helping me just moderate some of the questions we have as we go along, but I really encourage engagement. A lot of the subjects I'm going to be talking about today are aspects of our psyche. So these things are often symbolic. I use storytelling. They're slightly abstract, which means I don't want to lose you through the process. I think I was slightly nervous about this session because there's so much, and a lot of the things I'm sharing with you, I've been considering since, or working on in considerable fashion, probably for about 20 years. And I don't want to lose its depth because I glance over it in a slide. The other thing I wanted to say about the session is, folks, there's no, quick and easy way out. There's no 5 tips to reach success or happiness. There is no quick answer or quick fix here. I don't want to prepare that for you. I don't want to provide anyone with a small dopamine hit because they get an insight and think they've figured this out. The subject around psychological resilience is a really big subject. Entire modalities in psychotherapy and religion and all sorts of things have been created to deal with these subjects. So I want to humbly give this credence to this, and what I hope the session does is it's on one end we get a deeper appreciation for the subject and how it relates to us during this time, but also hopefully it spurs or stirs a fire in you to become more curious about these subjects if you're not already. If you're already deeply immersed in these subjects, I hope it can deepen and support that. Many of you might know a lot more about this than me too, who here. So I don't want to pretend that I'm some guru and leader on the subject matter. I would say though that I have a unique position, having worked with mostly social entrepreneurs on the continent and being an entrepreneur most of my life, and this being my passion since 2021, and I've shared it in a very limited format to the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Africa. So I would say this is probably the biggest platform I've shared this subject outside of a couple conferences in my usual professional world. I usually share these subjects in different groups and settings, but this is the first one we've launched this at this scale to our ecosystem. So please stop me. Please tell me if I'm going too fast or too far, and we can go from there. The other thing I wanted to say is hopefully Ivana will stop me too. This is a 2-hour session. We will take a short break just to give you a little bit of time to digest some of the information, possibly add some questions. We'll be stopping this a little bit after about an hour of going through the content. And lastly, too, please, if you can, suspend judgment, because I'm going to be sharing with you images, storytelling. Some of it's historic, some of it comes from the Middle Ages, some of it's contemporary now that you'd see in movies, and all of what I'm trying to share with you are images and symbols that can spur a deeper sense of a relationship and connection with ourselves during this time. So let's see if we can work through this, and let's see what your feedback is. I hope everyone's ready to go, and thank you for everyone joining. I see we've got 62 people, and I've seen consistent, everyone from Kenya to Namibia to Johannesburg to Toronto even. Wow, they're still awake. Okay, and Nigeria too. So amazing. So resilience. I want to start, obviously, like we all do, on Google or Wikipedia, our Oracle, and just look at some of the core frameworks around the definition of resilience. So it comes from a Latin word, resilience, which is the act of rebounding, or to rebound or recoil. So there's something about resilience that deals with something happening in someone's life and the ability to recoil or rebound or return to some form of previous baseline. And as a character trait, a person's resilience is often a person's mental ability to recover quickly from misfortune, illness, and depression. So built into resilience is this idea that something occurs, and at some form of speed, we're able to recover from whatever that setback or challenge is. And in considering the session today, I really thought that one of the key aspects of resilience is our ability to deal with uncomfortable feelings, uncomfortable thoughts, emotions, fears, and the ability to somehow work through that, transcend that, and return to some form of health. And during this time, for me at least, is been a time of inhabiting my quarantine. I think, from a personal perspective, this period, for many of us, if we're sitting at home, that we're in isolation, we're hooked in, many of us, to our devices. And even though our entire routines of moving so quickly in our work has slowed down, our monkey minds haven't. And I'm sure many of you are feeling the uncomfortableness of the uncertainty, the uncomfortableness of staying home, yet being hooked into our devices and the news. And we're also having to inhabit new ways of being at home with our loved ones. Now, this presents, I think, a lot of difficulty for many, including myself. I'm not immune from that. But it also has presented for me and my family an immense opportunity to just really reconnect with myself and reconnect with loved ones. I recently had a Zoom session with 16 university mates from all over the world, the first time I've ever done it. And one of my messages around pain and strife is it's intrinsically connected to opportunity. It's the only time I think in my life that I've ever experienced any form of reward is where there's a certain level of uncomfortableness. So inhabiting our uncomfortableness during this period, I think, is a tremendous, tremendous opportunity, especially since at every level of our existence are we feeling a sense of threat. From my perspective, I feel that the entire capitalist world is under heart attack and is going through resuscitation. In our personal lives, we've taken, in our business and my wife's business, a major hit financially. In my life right now, we're trying to buy a house into South Africa, and we've got an offer to purchase on a house right now. So in my own situation, we've had 50% of our family income removed, and we're purchasing a house which is being approved in a market that's almost being decimated, and around it's being decimated. So I want to say that because I'm giving this session does not mean by any extent and form that I'm immune from any of this. Luckily, the people that I think we have on this call today, if many of you are entrepreneurs and CEOs based in Africa, is that we are so used to being and operating in the fire all the time, that I think we have a level of resilience and a threshold of pain that maybe the global developed North hasn't felt since possibly World War II. And I think that really, we mustn't forget that. Especially for those living in South Africa right now, it seems to be that we orientate ourselves from one fire to the next. And my sense is resilience is a trait that we've almost had to embody because there's no other choice. I remember having a conference or participating in a conference about a year ago, and someone said to me, Max, I thought I was starting a business to, fulfill my purpose and make money. I didn't realize that I was going into a personal baptism of fire. I didn't realize the challenges that starting a venture in any environment, especially in Africa, would place on me. And I think that's really important, because maybe many of us have found ourselves into ventures not knowing that actually it's a massive personal development experiment that we unbeknowingly went through. So yeah, so I mean, if I go into my story very, very briefly around resilience, I would say, and this is quite personal, but I wanted to share it because I think all the capacity that I have now to be a business owner, an employer, a husband, a father, and take up a level of responsibility is that I've built my capacity over many, many years through dealing with aspects of my psyche and traits of my personality that are very uncomfortable. And I think the most uncomfortable traits that I have are these. So, in my life historically, from age probably 2021, I suffered greatly from insomnia. I remember when I entered banking when I was 22 in London in the early 2000s, my first job, I didn't sleep for almost 2 years. I slept 45 minutes for 2 years. And I think, I look at that situation and that 2-year period of sleeping 45 minutes a night, and I ask myself now, is that bad? What happened to me? Should I place the label of it being bad? In fact, not at all. It's probably the biggest gift that I ever had, because it flung me into a personal development journey since that period. I think the insomnia was definitely always been accompanied by anxiety and chronic back pain from my mid-20s. And with that, mood instability. And I think that pain, that uncomfortableness has been the most profound gift I've ever had in terms of my own sense of self, getting to know myself, growing a level of awareness. So I look at these things as not negatives. I really look at them as my own journey of getting to know myself. Both the positive and the negative aspects of myself, and learning to get used to myself and like, if not love, or form a relationship with that that's most uncomfortable with me. So this has been a long journey, and in some ways I feel going into this period with COVID-19 and all the instability, I feel like I've gone through the most intense training. I feel ready for this in some way, and ready to share some of this, but in a humble way, because I know how difficult those years, 20 years in fact, have been. I think one of the most important things around resilience I experienced for myself was that at a young age, I realized that I probably realized that going into my 30s that I was aging. And I realized that my greatest resilience was probably in my teenage years and my 20s, where I could, work 14 hours a day. I could eat anything I wanted, drink alcohol, and my bounce back was really, really strong. And what's interesting with age is not only do we age to, at some point, passing away or death, and so i.e. we are always trending towards atrophy with age. So naturally the body shifts over age, as much as we like it or don't like it, or as much as we try and manage it in certain ways, but we're always with age trending towards death. And at the same time, with age, we're trending towards taking on more responsibility. May that be dependents and beneficiaries. And I think with more financial responsibility, with all the things that come with age, the need to work on one's resilience and one's own personal development starts to increase. And I notice this particularly with the entrepreneurs I work with as soon as they get to their 30s and 40s. Some people call it a midlife crisis, other people call it a midlife unraveling. And that unraveling is that the ways that we used to operate when we were young need to shift and move. And we need to, and the ways that we possibly treated ourselves, our bodies, our loved ones, how we pushed ourselves perhaps when we were younger, we're not able to sustain that as we age. So that means that I think as, with time, with all these, with the body's going through what it does and these increased stresses, anxieties, and responsibilities, I think personal development and fulfilling a life that's meaningful and dealing with one's pains is a profound and important step in human development. So, as I shared with you before, I think what spurred me into the session was this graph that McKinsey produced, which was really around how companies need to act to be able to reform to what is the potential new. So if we've now moved into a new economy and we can't go back with this crisis, a lot of things need to shift in our businesses. But before they can shift in our businesses, before we can actually resolve things, change things, reimagine things, reform things into a new environment, we can only do that in our ventures if we've done that in ourselves. And I feel that this period of quarantine and isolation is probably the most profound period to sit with all the things that are uncomfortable in us that need resolution. And one of the things that one of the other first graphics that I'm sure many of you saw on social media, which was, I think, the first sort of big attempt publicly, and I don't know who the author was, which was looking at resilience during COVID-19, was this graph. I just want to see, just from the chat, did anyone see? Has anyone seen this graphic? If you can just give me any insights. Yes, so we've got quite a few that have seen this. So wonderful in the age of social media, just how quickly everything's shared, and we don't need to share this. So it seems that a few are saying no, but many are saying yes. Now, I think this is one of the crux graphics to show possibly what resilience could look like. But at the same time, it's a part truth, because there's also an aspect of how it might not look like and how it could be kind of deceptive. So, at the core of this, it's basically trying to display a human being's evolution in dealing with any adversity. At one level, how do you want to be in a fear zone? Where you are, hoarding toilet paper, you're forwarding all messages you get around COVID-19, you're hooked on your device permanently, and you're transmitting anger and emotions to everyone. Is that the human being you want to be during this time? Or do you have an increased self-awareness where perhaps you want to be aware of those levels of subjective fear that you have that might not be the truth, and start to work with that and learn from that? And what you'll notice here too is that these four circles are not separate from each other. If you move from the fear zone to the learning zone, it doesn't mean that you're not fearful anymore. It means that you're able to self-manage fear in a new way. And as soon as you start to become self-aware of the situation and how much fear you're sharing, you can start to actually acknowledge your own fear, where when you're in the fear zone, you are the fear. You're fully identified with it. You're acting from that place. But in the learning zone, there's an increased amount of space. And you're learning to sort of stop maybe compulsively reading the news. You're perhaps starting to, not just have coffee and chocolate and ice cream all day to calm the emotions. You're perhaps starting to, balance your food intake, realizing that, you shouldn't perhaps be reading COVID news at 3 o'clock in the morning on your device, or 2 o'clock late in the evening. And I think this is a profound time to be working with with one's fears and this learning zone. The growth zone's a really interesting place, in that as soon as you've learned to self-manage your body, your emotions, your awareness, you can begin to have capacity to support others, only because you're supporting yourself. If your body is in a healthy place, your mind is being nurtured, you've got increased self-awareness and presence, perhaps you've taken up yoga or meditation or certain breath practices. I would even bring awareness to this course I'm giving right now, this webinar. and see if you can just bring awareness to your breath while you're listening to me. So, just that simple act of breathing in through one's nose and breathing out, breathing in and breathing out. Just that simple act actually changes your nervous system from a sympathetic fight or flight mode into a parasympathetic relaxed mode. Just breath, just being connected to your breath. And that breath connects your psychological aspect with your physical aspect. As soon as you're breathing and inhaling and exhaling, you'll notice the body-mind start to calm down. And I would recommend, even during the session, just focusing on that, just enough that you can actually hear the breath through your nose when you breathe in, because it makes a sound, and just connect with that on the exhale and see how you feel when listening to me. So these fear zones, learning zones, and growth zones, one of the biggest mistakes I think people make is that they feel, man, I want to be out of that fear zone and I want to be into the growth zone. That's where I want to be. I don't want to be in the fear zone. I'm going to work as hard as I can. I'm going to do my green juices, do my meditations. I want to exit the fear zone into the learning zone. I think this is one of the largest mistakes that we should halt ourselves on. I even had a little halt, stop message right there on the next slide. And why I say halt is that I think, although very powerful, this graphic, the largest mistake I think we make as human beings is we do something called end gaming. We want success, enlightenment, purpose, meaning. We want to be in the growth zone where we're eking out every last part of our productivity. And the part of our psyche that is fear, in my experience, never goes. It's a companion for life. Unfortunately, we can't, in the earth, be body, we can't beat death. And fearing death is very natural. We can't beat having our loved ones pass away, our businesses being lost, and all the layers of our relational turbulence that we might experience. We can't avoid these things. And fear is a very natural reaction to this. Our entire brain and biology is geared for us to fear as an act to protect us. However, what I see with entrepreneurs, and I've seen in myself, is that if we've, from a very young age, suppressed fear, tried to get rid of it, or on its opposite, we fully identified with it and we live in fear, or we try to run away from it by trying to be ultra positive and saying affirmations and doing a whole range of practices, and we don't form a relationship with those parts of ourselves that we do not like, that are fearful, that have tough emotions. If we don't do that, we cannot really ever get into the growth zone. We can't transcend fear in any shape and form. And I think what many new age and contemporary motivational speakers and personal development practitioners try to do is they try pull you away from one, saying negative thoughts are bad, you should be in the positive growth zone. And I feel that you'll see the 5 resilience skills, which comes from another framework. Accessing and sustaining positive emotion all the time is just not reasonable. And fear, for me, has been the most wonderful learning journey that I've been on. And I would really recommend that we don't need to suppress fear. We don't need to overly identify it, but we can work with it and learn it. It's the primary tool for our success, actually. And one of my next sessions and webinars is going to be on purpose. And purpose, for me and all the purpose-driven entrepreneurs I've worked with, I've seen the relationship between one's ability to overcome their core fears and core wounds and core pains as their actual purpose in life, or one of their purposes in life. And I see this with founders all the time, especially socially driven or impact founders. If you're working with, let's say, gender-based violence and gender issues, you often find organizations and ventures and businesses and technology companies started by women who've been affected by gender-based violence. In some ways, they're resolving what they have gone through in their families or to themselves into the world. And I really believe that, and that's for another session, that we can't escape our fear. It's actually the very thing that's our power. And accessing our power means we need to access and transcend our fear. I won't go on too much about it right now, but I wanted to just bring that forward. I might just take a break right now and just get a sense if there are any questions to date or any feedback. I'll take your question just now on the slides. I mean, they will be available later. So just to answer Gwen, I will make the slides available if everyone wants the slides. So I'm happy to share those. Are there any other questions? Or give me some feedback if you don't have questions, if everyone is on the chat, if everyone is understanding what I'm saying or resonates with it or wants to ask any questions now.
Max, it would be quite interesting to hear from the participants how they try and encourage themselves to have a relationship with their fear, whether it's in their business, whether it's in a personal way. Yeah, so it would be great to hear what people are thinking in that respect.
Brilliant. Please, people, if you're asking questions, use the question function, not the chat function. Thank you, Nestine, who's my accountant. Please put your questions in the questions poll, and yes, as Ivana said, please share how they're dealing with this thus far, if they have any questions today. If you don't, I understand. Okay. Okay, so Nestine's asking more general question around the live webinar. Yes, we'll make the live webinar available. We haven't worked out quite how we're going to do it just yet. It's moving into one of our learning platforms, but we will also record it and share it with you. So if you want the slides, you're most welcome to also get the recording. Okay, so everyone's happy thus far. I don't have any questions. I'm glad. Usually, I can see your facial expressions, and I can see if we're progressing or moving. I think before I move on from the slide, one thing I think is really important is to bring a little bit of social awareness around how reality is wobbling in your lives. So I'm noticing people going through relationship breakups, everything. Our loved ones through periods of fear, and ourselves, there's lots of movement in one's house. So if we're trying to deal with issues in our business around how to find success in our business, some of the answers actually lie closer to home, in one's home actually. So how you are with yourself on a day-to-day basis, monitoring your levels of fear. If we treated fear a bit like, let's say, a wounded puppy, a shelter puppy in a cage, and that puppy is howling and screaming, and that puppy is you screaming with all your fears and uncomfortableness, whatever might arise during a day. How you treat that puppy, whether you hold it gently, whether you provide yourself care or your family care, or you have huge amounts of emotional swings of anger and resistance. All of these things right now are very important. They're not to be judged. They're hugely important in working with. Richard said that fear is his driving motivation. I'm not afraid to fail. I usually tap into my fear as fuel to go out and do it. So that's an interesting idea too. In fact, I would say that most of my life, I was the person who, when I was in probably my under 10, I suppressed a lot of fear. And from my teens onwards into probably even my early 30s, fear was my key driver, that I was almost at war with, battling, tapped into, but in a way that for me left me not in a highly resilient, restful place. And I think one thing I notice with many entrepreneurs is that their relationship with fear is a driver to do more, to work harder, to not sleep. And what I'm finding now going into my 40s is that I'm working with fear like I would work with a puppy, in that I'm caring for it, giving myself, being gentle on myself, allowing myself to rest. And what I'm noticing in my own body in the last 5 years is that when I was younger, I was able to tap into a lot of energy and physical form and go from 0 to very extreme states. But then when I would let go, when I would actually, let that go, I would be able to relax fully. I think what happened in my 20s and 30s and when I became an entrepreneur, I found myself not being able to fully relax and not being able to fully turn on, in that I was in that half space. So for me, what's happened is that tapping into my fear as a drive to work harder was the tool that got me through my 20s and 30s. But now into my 40s, I'm having to relearn how to relax my body fully and my mind fully, and not be permanently semi-on in a semi sort of flexed state. And I think that's something to notice around during this period. If you're in quarantine, notice how well you're speaking or not sleeping. Notice to what degree your anxiety flips and peaks, how your mood is stable or unstable. Notice how you eat and just notice how switched on or switched off, and to what degree we can let go and to what degree we can relax. But I want to stop there, and I hope that's supportive. I've got a question from Davin. How does one manage this transition? I'm trying to read the whole question. Okay, how does one manage this transition? The process you show requires more of an evolutionary approach, i.e. over a period of time, whereas the real situation, one's life on the ground day to day, is actually fast-paced and the whole context around us daily. I think that's super important, Davin. I think that's this approach does require an evolutionary approach over time, but at the same time, I think where we have to start is how we feeling right now, in like today, right in this very moment, and to start bringing awareness. And if things are fast-paced, actually purposely slow them down, because there's an assumption that if I work faster and I work harder, I will actually get done more. And what I've noticed over years is that the harder I worked, the less focus I was able, and my quality started to decrease. And I think what we're going to go into just now is some approach around being balanced. And that balance requires you to slow down as part of knowing when it's important to speed up. That's really super important, but you have to start now. And the only thing I could say I could offer from this session is that if we become curious and a fire burns in ourselves to want to learn about these things, it's really at this time in history, all this information around self-awareness and personal development is so accessible now, more so than it ever was ever before. So I think this is a great place to start, and let the evolutionary approach happen over time. Don't add pressure on yourself that you have to get this now. You don't. Just be gentle on yourself and work with it slowly. Martin's got a question here. Does this resonate? In my experience, sometimes slowing things down is a good way to enable self-reflection that's necessary to some things you're talking about. Absolutely agree, Martin. My sense is that in modern life, especially now that we have smartphones and people are so accessible and reality is working at such fast waves, slowing down has actually become more difficult. And, I find it with myself. I can be permanently locked to my device and answering questions from the moment I get up to when I get in the car, to taking calls, to getting in the office. And we couldn't do that 15 years ago. People would have to call you on your office line and you could listen to music in the car. But our incessant need for learning, taking in more information and moving quicker, I think is one of the largest causes of sustained depression for a long period of time. Okay, I'm going to move a little bit forward. I'm going to come, Nestine, to your question. Thank you for everyone. I'm also going to invite a couple people online as a test, if people are comfortable who ask questions. I want to see how that works. I haven't tried it on this session. So I'm glad everyone's enjoying this. I apologize to some degree because these are really big subjects that actually need a lot of time. This is a really big subject. I mean, even Jean said fear is an umbrella of poverty. It leads to a vicious poverty cycle. I completely agree. The relationship between fear and poverty, in fact, the fear of poverty is a very large human fear that in fact keeps people in poverty. And I notice this in my work with colleagues and clients and suppliers I work with. Their relationship to money is and their fear-based relationship to their money is probably one of the biggest learnings that they need to get to. And the simple answer is often with these things that we don't have to do more. We just have to. And I think this is what I'm going to be working on in the future, in the slides going forward. Okay, so I want to ask again, has anyone seen this slide before? Or has anyone looked into integral theory developed by Ken Wilber? It's about 30 years of his work. Ken Wilber is a wonderful philosopher across, he's an academic and a philosopher across every major faith. And he started developing, I guess, a framework which is considered a theory for everything. The reason why I'm showing you this is it looks complex, but it really isn't. But it's, I think, fundamental. This particular table is fundamental to understand our own reality. And our own reality starts with I, the subject. Now, the I, the me, is an individual aspect. So you'll notice here on the y-axis, this is individual, and below there on the y-axis is collective. So in this top left-hand corner, your thoughts, your emotions, your memories, your states of mind, your perceptions, your immediate sensation is the hardware and software of your brain, and everything that you experience in reality comes from your thoughts, emotions, and states of mind. Now, one of the first important lessons, I think, in self-awareness is realizing that you are not your thoughts, you are not your fears, you are not your emotions. These thoughts, these emotions, these memories that you have of your past, these states of mind of being anxious, these are just states that you're experiencing. They arise and then they go away. I think everyone can agree with me that when a fearful thought or emotion or 10 minutes arises, it doesn't permanently stay. It's like a cloud that goes. And everything around our biological infrastructure, the hormones that fire, the chemicals that fire, they fire around our thoughts and emotions. They move our bodies. So there's something subjective about thoughts that, firstly, the I that experiences our thoughts, this is an individual interior subject. So you'll notice here on this side, this left barrier here, this is individual and this is interior. We experience in our thoughts individually inside our minds. Well, where they actually are experienced, we don't know, but they seem to arrive, they seem to stay, and they seem to go. Now, on the other side, on the exterior individual, we can look at your computer or a chair and call it it, not I. And we can observe it. It's very clear that the sky is blue. That's an objective view. You could say, right now I'm sitting at a chair staring at a computer screen. The computer screen is the objective it. I'm the subject, and I'm looking at an individual object called I could be looking at my body. So I, the subject, is actually observing my body. That's an observation. However, if you look at the sky, for instance, and this is quite foundational to Ken Wilber's integral framework. If you look at the sky and say, I think the sky is beautiful, you objectively are looking at the sky, but then you're applying your mind and flavoring it with beautiful, or it's ugly, or whatever emotion. So what's really important here is that at the center of every person's experience here, there is an individual called an I that has thoughts, emotions, memories, states of mind that are subjective and they're yours. And you're at the same time, you are individually looking at objects that are to you material. I think this is all pretty rational stuff. Now, what's happening during this COVID time is we're experiencing a whole range of uncomfortable and possibly beautiful connective thoughts, emotions, and memories. And because we're not racing around in our cars, we're actually starting to have a deeper sense and feeling of the uncomfortableness of the thoughts, emotions that arrive. And as I said before, one of the first important insights that is not a single is that you are not your thoughts. They arrive and then they go. You can control them, but you also can't control them. You can't control a thought arriving into your mind, and sometimes the emotion and the feeling in your body is so quick that you sometimes can't change that. But what you can do is you can bring distance and awareness to your thoughts and emotions. So this is the interior, thoughts, emotions. This is the exterior, but this is the individual. And if we go to the collective, what we start to see are subjective or interior ideas that are not objective. So if we look at things like culture, if we think about what does the Afrikaans culture or the Zulu culture mean to us, these are collective, not individual aspects, but they also are happening in the mind. You can't find Zulu culture in a chair. You can find a book that speaks about Zulu culture, but you can't find it. And what we're seeing right now is we're seeing at a very real level, some of our cultures starting to be influenced around COVID-19. We had no awareness of this virus. So we could, the objective, if we could take the virus now, we can look at its genome, but how this affects our behaviors in the world or our interpretation on the behaviors is a collective and interior subject. So what we have in the world, if we think about anything that's abstract, anything that is a generalization around race, around women, around any subject, these are collective, intersubjective aspects. And lastly, what we have are collective exterior subjective aspects. That means it's not a chair that's objective, it is the South African legal system, our constitution, our technology backbone, of which the whole our fiber works on, all the systems, the public healthcare system, all the layers that you can objectively look at a collective level. All of these things we're able as individuals to interpret as a whole. Now, what's happening with our entire reality, whether it's our internal thoughts or our financial system or our culture, is everything is starting to wobble, folks. Everything feels unstable. These things felt more stable. The institutions that hold up our shared values are starting to wobble. Democracies are starting to wobble. And all of these layers that are either in our objective environment, they're all being interpreted by our subjective thoughts, emotions, and eyes. So everything that's being interpreted is happening from our brains, but we are interpreting things that are happening everywhere. Now, what you'll notice too, which is the most powerful thing that we can do as entrepreneurs and creators, is that we can come up with thoughts, feelings, emotions, and use our imagination to turn ideas into objects. And if we turn an idea into a beautifully designed chair, we can then create also a business. And a business can therefore become a collective of people, which moves it into the exterior and objective or collective realm. And I hope is this making sense to everyone? So all I'm trying to do is build a framing for how we as human beings experience reality. And I guess what I'm trying to say, everyone, is everything that we have an idea around is clouded by our subjective thinking. And our subjective thinking does not mean it's the objective truth. It means that we've got to really bring self-awareness to our thoughts and emotions because they cloud everything. And we see this often in journalism too. A journalist can report on something that's an objective event that happened. On this date, Cyril Ramaphosa, announced the lockdown. But then what we have are all the subjective opinions around the objective fact. And I think we often must be able to now dissociate a little or discriminate between what is subjective and what is objective. And this is really important, I think, when you're tapped into our device every single day. If you're reading about that's an objective fact, but that subjectively creates emotions of fear that this is really big, and that if we see stimulus packages coming out in the exterior collective or the interobjective, that's a stimulus package for South Africa from our Reserve Bank, that stimulates fears and thoughts and emotions. We can never decalibrate our own architecture of our brain and our thoughts and emotions from how we see the world. And this is really important because what we're trying to understand here is what's truthful for us and what is an opinion that might be incorrect. And I think for me, even when I'm talking to you right now, I'm having to always try and prove myself wrong, because anything that I feel that I know, I get it. Life gives me a good clap 2-3 years later saying, okay, well, you thought you knew something, but actually you only knew this amount of it. And actually there's actually a bigger, wider truth. But I think this is a very useful thing to study, integral theory, because the key insight here is we've got to be able to differentiate between what is a reality and what is a dream that we're coming up with in our own minds around what our life is actually like. And if we're stuck in stories, in our thoughts and emotions during this time, we're going to go through tremendous amounts of pain without self-awareness. Okay, are there any questions that we want to take here? Already we're on an hour, so I'm going to give maybe five more minutes, and then we can take a 5-minute break and pop to the bathroom and grab a coffee, and then we can come back. Any questions? Have I lost you folks? We still have 62 people, 63. By the way, we hit the maximum amount of people registered, which was interesting. So I need to upgrade my software. Anything else, folks? Is this good?
Max, there was a question from Nestine earlier on
Yes.
here.
Okay, so Nestine wants to know what are the most important 5 things you can do for your team members or your clients in these times to assist them in making this transition into working with fear and embracing or accepting change. It's a hard one, Nestine. I think when I was younger, I used to have a certain sense of, in my own rights, arrogance on thinking on how people should deal with anything. I think the most, I don't know if I'm going to come up with 5 things. It sounds like, 3 or 5. It doesn't. I think they're probably 2 most important things that I would focus on. I would focus on your own fears. Only work with that, and everything else will then manifest from working with your own fears. And what I tended to find was that I spent a lot of my time trying to look after people when I was younger, and giving advice. But I think as my own sense is changing as I get older, I'm just working with myself. And if people need support, I'm just being present there and providing them care. Not trying to give them too many strategies on how to deal with them. Other than that, providing care for fear. I think that's one of the biggest things with fear and change, is just to be there. If someone wants you to be there. And sometimes it's just a hug. Like, really, it doesn't sometimes need advice. It just needs your presence and time to listen to another. And I think if you can be there for others and listen to them and provide care and kindness, that's a wonderful starting point. Anything else can be asked, over time. I hope that's helpful. So lastly, Nestine also wants to know, what is the best daily habits to cultivate to practice self-awareness? I'm going to give you some modalities a little bit later, just very lightly. I don't want to focus on them. You can look us up on Google. This is not new. I think the foundation of self-awareness is peace. And if that takes the form of going for a walk for you, or having a meditation, or just sit at multiple points in the day, just to allow the nervous system to move into that parasympathetic place, and that you can connect with yourself and feel yourself. I think that's probably the most foundational recommendation I can begin to start with. I think that's the cornerstone, is connecting with yourself, getting off devices, and connecting with your loved ones with you. Okay, if Ivana, you can resolve some of those questions, that would be great. Okay, so I think we'll take a quick 5 minutes, a quick 5-minute rest, and please have a thought on how this is working with you, and then we're going to go a little bit deeper and see how we go. I'm not sure this 2 hours is going to be enough to get to the end of what I want to go through, but I want to at least start. So I'll be back with you at 11. Let's say 11:09, 11:10. So please take a break, and we'll be back very, very soon. Great, thank you. And please ask any questions if you have. All right, folks, is everyone back? We're going into the meat of the presentation right now. I'm posting a link for those who want the slides. You'll see it on the chat function. Just let me know you've all got it. Should be available for download or for view if you want to open it up separately. You're all welcome to have it. So this is a little bit of a deeper section. I wish I had more time because a lot of this is, and I think this is the section that's most at risk with you folks, possibly losing you a little bit because I'm introducing very deep pieces of imagery that I've worked with, some of them for almost 10 years, one image almost for 10 years. But I wanted to jump into quickly before that some of the ways that people and us as human beings deal with soothing or managing pain. And some of, obviously, you know, I try to label them because I think society labels them. And I want to share with you that the labeling is not what I believe, but often what many people believe. So if we look at how we deal with our pain and we soothe our pain, many people would believe that there are unhealthy, bad, or negative ways to deal with that. And I delve in a lot of those into differing degrees. Definitely not the cocaine and heroin or sex as much when I was younger. But, you know, things like ice cream, chocolate, coffee, sugar, alcohol, I should have put tobacco there, are all ways that we as human beings deal with uncomfortable feelings, and they provide comfort. We might argue that these things are bad for us, but many of them in certain moderations are really, really important. You know, I used to work very closely when I was in London with people with mental issues. I started a nonprofit, and a lot of them were strangely, this is my foray into social enterprise work was in the early 2000s when I was working in the bank. I was dealing with the national, with with hospitals and public mental health institutions in the UK, and dealing with people that were committing suicide. And one of the things that kept them from committing suicide, that ended up being the worst thing that they ever took, but the best thing for them in dealing with pain, was heroin, which is essentially dirty morphine. And what often I used to judge, it really challenged my thinking, but what I realized, what we often deem as so terrible has in fact destroyed lives, but it's also saved lives. And often what we deem bad is bad to a certain degree, but there's a more nuanced, less polarity view on some of these subjects. But I wanted to bring this slide up because there's this polarity. We live in a life of duality, and I don't want to go too much into duality, but it's probably the most important thing in our reality, in that, you know, my face has a left dimension and a right dimension. We can go up or down, left or right, front or back. What's negative in dealing and managing with pain is, you know, human beings have this idea that I want to keep on driving myself to more healthier exercise. I want to lose weight. I want to be disciplined with my time. I want to do more yoga, eat more healthy, and I want to stop doing all those bad things. And unfortunately for most people, unless you're a very, very stringent disciplinarian, as human beings, we actually use those so-called bad things to varying degrees. And I want to go into those a little bit, because how we deal with pain and how we label our ways of working with pain actually end up creating a massive fight in ourselves. And this fight that I see so many entrepreneurs, you know, friends, wives, family going through is, I need to do more of this and less of this. I need to permanently lose more weight. I need to be more disciplined. I need to work harder. I need to be more productive. I need to drink more green juice, do more healthier things, and I need to do less of those other things. And I use this example as one of the bases for where I think many people have a battle within themselves going. And I wanted to introduce this battle, and this is the battle that we can see in contemporary Star Wars movies between, you know, the force and the dark force and the light. And it sets up, I think, not only a battle that we see between the world we want to live in outside of ourselves, which is kind and compassionate, to a world that's exploitive and mean and all these things. So the external objective world, or that we create a subjective opinion on, of being bad, is also happening inside ourselves with all these negative emotions and feelings and things and all these rules we set up for ourselves of what we should do and what we shouldn't do. And I think the foundation of my message today is we as human beings have to learn how to accept ourselves and accept life as it is. And at the same time, not all, and at the same time, allow evolution to take place for it to get better and better. And for me, I think the vast majority of my life has been lived in a fight between what I call the light and the dark. It's easy, you know, in banking, we always used to say the upside takes care of itself. You've got to manage the downside risk. And I think my whole life has been around trying to mitigate, transcend, fight that which is the downside. And it's set up that way for us on every level. And if we think of our traumas, our pains, our fears, our anxieties, and us wanting to be healthy, happy, successful, we're wanting one thing and not wanting the other thing. And this creates an enormous fight inside ourselves. It's the largest fight that I know. It's the one that governs our relationships with our loved ones, our closest relationships, but more important, how we treat ourselves, how we treat that inside of us, which we call bad or negative. Because as human beings, folks, we can't be perfect. We have parts of ourselves that might not ever change. And my wife will tell you all about it. I mean, I can be a bully. I can be a real asshole. I can be pushy. I can be rude. I can be a button pusher with people. These are parts of my character that I've had since a young boy and a child. And I've got a 2.5-year-old right now. And I mean, he's almost identical to me. And so somehow these aspects of our parts of ourselves that we're ashamed of, that are our dark sides, one we used to push away, or we can try ignore and push away, and we keep on moving to the light. And I want to talk about that just now because there's a wonderful story about that. But this reconciliation of this battle between light and dark, I think is very, very important. And I think the symbol of the yin and yang is a very deep symbol of duality. And you know that in sometimes, you know, this concept of dualism, you know, describes how something opposite and contrary may actually be complementary and interconnected and interdependent in the natural world. And this interrelationship between, if you are too focused on success, your light side, you know, I'm going to go into Icarus just now, but if you're so focused on being the best human being you can be, and working so hard and being productive and wanting to be a billionaire. Now the new billionaire is not being a billionaire anymore. It's being an entrepreneur that supports 1 billion poor people. If you're so focused on that, it means that there's a dark side of being too focused on the light, and that is you do not actually bring any light towards your shadow aspects of your ego and yourself. Those negative parts of your character. You can ignore them. You might want to escape them. You can escape them through positivity. You can escape them through many shapes and forms. And on the corollary, if you're so embedded in your dark side, in your laziness and lethargy and you know, and dishonesty, if you're so involved with that, that has its own profound impacts. But there is, in those types of people that are so embodied in their dark, there's something quite refreshing about them, because you can see who they are. They really are true to who they are often. And the people that I meet, and the entrepreneurs, is particularly social entrepreneurs, folks, all over the continent, those who are the loudest, those who are supposedly saving Africa, they have the most unconscious parts. In fact, I would say that the shadow aspects of their personalities are actually controlling them, their life. And I had this previously in a business venture with a partner. I had someone who was so focused on being a social entrepreneur to take care of African children that I was working with, that he couldn't even look after his own family. The polarities were so vast. And I think it's really important, the most important thing to tackle the parts of ourselves that we don't like, is that we form a relationship with them. If we can shine a light on those shadow aspects of ourselves, and it's a never-ending story, folks. It's never-ending. It doesn't stop, because as soon as you shine a light on a shadow, suddenly you can see it, but then the shadow scuttles into the corners in the darkness, and then you shine somewhere else. So this is a never-ending evolution of people. And most of the entrepreneurs I work with in modern society, most of the literature in personal development is trying to work harder. In fact, they're trying to even now, it's even worse, where people are using personal development as some form of act, some form of identity that they form. And that I think most people in this focus of light struggle just to be human, to be flawed, to show the parts of themselves that they're ashamed of, and they don't. That's the biggest thing that they do not want to show. And I think this causes a major internal schism and a fight. if you ignore the shadow aspects of ourselves, the parts that we're ashamed of, the traumas, if we ignore them completely, we actually become them. They control us. And I see this all the time because I'm working with social entrepreneurs raising money and capital. You can see all these subjective aspects playing themselves out, particularly around money. A lot of social entrepreneurs are so cause-driven, they would consider themselves so cause-driven beyond the need for money, yet so desperate for money. So these polarities, noticing these polarities in oneself is the most profound thing, and it only comes from being curious with yourself. If you're curious with yourself, you'll be interested. And I think one of the ancient stories of Icarus really shows that, because Icarus ignored his father's instructions not to fly too close to the sun. When the wax in his wings melted, he tumbled out of the sky and fell into the sea, where he drowned, sparking the idiom, don't fly too close to the sun. So that's really important. If you're going to fly too close to the sun, you are going to crash and burn. And it's really good to, because crashing and burning is a very hard pill to swallow. Not many people know this, but a number of years ago, when my first child was born, I experienced exactly that, a complete mental collapse from working too hard, pushing myself to extremes. And if you push yourself to extremes, what generally happens is that the reverse starts to happen. You start to, if you're gonna push yourself to that extreme, expect the collapse. This is the nature of reality, and I want to talk about that nature because I find that this image of the nature of polarity most expressed in a Buddhist symbol called the mandala. It's also an Indian symbol, but the meaning of the word mandala is circle, and all mandalas are based on circle and fused with other designs to form a deeper meaning. So I won't go into some of the historical meanings there. They're very vast of mandalas. I want to apply my meaning. If we had to, for instance, part of what the mandala does in a circle, it says the whole of reality is trying to pull you back to your center. Now, it doesn't mean you sit at your center permanently like a Buddhist in a cave, but what it means is that, in the way I interpret it, is if you start to move away from your center to the outer boundaries of extremism. So let's say the outer boundary here is I'm working too hard, I'm not sleeping, I'm drinking far too much coffee, I'm permanently hooked to my cell phone. If there's no self-awareness and you start going to those extremes, what then happens is that the polarity, the force of coming back to the center is so hard that it shoots you back to the opposite side, which is a collapse. Likewise, if I had to, let's say what I think is a good thing, right? We said exercise is a good thing. If I exercise too much, my whole nature repels and that I lose weight, I become fit, I become very muscular, and then I don't feed the other parts of myself, and I actually then rebound into the opposite way, where I eat really badly, I do no exercise, I put on weight. And so somewhere between moving, not to the extremes, but moving in between here and bringing more self-awareness is really, really important. Now, you can take anything that if anything even too healthy, if you do too much yoga, there is a cost for that. If you do too many recreational drugs, there's a cost for that. If you have a glass of wine, that's fine. But if you're drinking 5 glasses of wine per night, the force brings you back the other way. Does this make sense for everyone? So what I'm saying is that with self-awareness, with trying to resolve the parts of yourselves that become too extreme, we need to learn to bring self-awareness, to bring ourselves back to a center. But we can't remain at the center in perpetuity. It's always doing this, moving up and down and left and right. And that is for any subject. If you see a family member too much, you don't want to see them as much. If you see someone too little, you miss your family members. So this is the balance that we're needing to create to form fluidity in our lives. And if we get too far to the extremes, we crash and burn the other way. Is everyone getting that? How does that feel to everyone? Can I take any questions on that? Is everyone still here?
We're here.
Okay, so the mandala is a really useful mechanism for trying to understand balance. And balance is always a balancing of, if you've got 2 cups of water and you've got one that's too full, you have to learn to readjust and rebalance. And life is permanently, fluidly trying to move between both. And when you're fighting with oneself, it's easy to move into extremes. And I think I work on the extremes far too much. And if you're noticing you're working on the extremes, i.e. you're being too extremely lazy and doing nothing, try to move back to more discipline. If you're becoming too disciplined and too controlling, you need to pull yourself back and give yourself a bit of time. I mean, some person, I sat with a project, and he was so disciplined that he was even finding time. He was giving himself a scheduled hour to be undisciplined. And I was like, how do you do that? How do you get so disciplined? How do you slot in the time for you to be spontaneous? When you're spontaneous, you're spontaneous. And I think working with extremes will always deplete your nervous system. It will always put you on guard and put you in a place where you're in a hyped up mode. And I don't think that's very useful or supportive for any form of resilience, because we need to be able to have a certain level of self-monitoring and nervous system maintenance that needs to give us a full life over a long period of time, especially if things are very unstable. And this time, sitting at home right now and feeling that instability, and the parts of us that want to be extreme, that want to go out and do 5 hours of exercise a day, or just binge watch Netflix. These are all wonderful things for practices of self-awareness of where you are. So ultimately, balance, folks, is this old image from the Middle Ages called the chariot, in that for you to be a master of your chariot in your life, we have to have a grip of both the light horse, the light side of us. You'll notice that the light horse has also dark in it. Have you noticed that? And we have to be able to grip the dark horse. And they have to work together to form the balance. And if they form the balance together, we can ride our chariot down. We can ride our chariot down in a way that we can guide our lives with that balance. And if we drive with the white horse only with one rein, and we leave the dark horse or we ignore it, the chariot is going to be completely wobbly, and vice versa. So these parts of moving our soul, our body, ourselves through life, we need to grip rein and guide both of them. And there's something about free will, being able to be self-aware and guide the two of these horses in life, that takes us to wherever our destination or destiny and journey is. And becoming a king or a queen of your chariot is probably one of the most profound goals in life. I hope this is making sense. If this imagery doesn't make sense, please let me know. But I want to show you that to steer your life, you have to steer both. And I can't say, and it's easy to form a relationship with your light side. Everyone can do that, right? It's easy to acknowledge the parts of ourselves that are really, really wonderful. It's the dark horse that's the problem, right? And I think that's the most. If you want to take away anything from today, it's begin to start forming. Get curious about your dark horse, your fears, your anxieties, your traumas. You've got every opportunity with especially your loved ones. If you've got a wife or a husband, children, a business partner, you will see those dark sides come up in your most intimate of places, and you often don't want to share those parts of our character. Let's see, we have a question. Okay, we've got a couple. To dress as if you're going to work makes me. So Liesel says, my philosophy during COVID lockdown is to dress as if you're going to work. Makes me set for the day. Well, Liesel, I'm glad that works for you. You shouldn't see the way I'm dressed. I'm dressed well in the top half, not the bottom half. But it's wonderful that works for you. Luther wants to ask, what 3 aspects? Maybe Luther, I wonder if you would be willing to come online and just give me more insight into the 3 aspects. I sometimes forget what I'm saying. Let me quickly invite you on stage, Luther. This is an experiment, by the way. Let's see if he accepts, if you want to, and ask a question. Luther's joining us. He's in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. Let's see if he comes online. Luther had a question. What is the 3 aspects? Let's see if he comes online. Luther, you just need to accept. If you don't want to, I completely understand. We can cancel that. Okay, he's on stage. We have Luther. This is a good experiment. Hi, Luther.
Are you well?
Yes. Are you enjoying the session?
Very much so. Just your picture of the chariot. You say the chariot vehicle in life is moved by 3 interwoven psychological aspects. What is that 3 psychological, or will you still be dealing with that?
That's a really good question. I pondered over that. So so the 3 aspects is you've got the aspect of strength, your light side. You've got all the aspects of your psyche that are your traumas, fears, and negative parts of your personality.
Okay.
And then the part which is most important is the aspect of your psyche that observes both of them and is able through free will to make the determination. So only through the third party, being aware of both the light and the dark, and having accepted that you have both forces, are you able to intermediate between them to steer the carriage in the right direction. That's
okay. Got it. Thanks.
The part of you that's the part of us that's aware of our thoughts and emotions and what arises within us, and is able to differentiate and dissociate and connect and disconnect, becomes the guider of the chariot.
Great. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you for that. That was a good first experiment. I like that. That worked. Thank you. Thank you for that, Luther. We have 25 minutes left. Time is going quickly, but I hope that image is helpful to everyone, because the analogy of the chariot is everything that guides you in your life and guides me. I'm now bringing you to my most important image, and this is the image that I would say has guided 10 years of my life. I first saw this when I was 22, this image, and it's something that is with me every day. And I would say this is the crux of the entire story. This is what I've been building towards, this image. And this is one that cannot be, its depth cannot be ascertained in just one session. But this is the image. So strength, the image of the strength card that comes from the tarot. I wrote here, the greatest act of courage or strength is to face one's greatest fears, their beast. So if you imagine your fears or the dark parts of your aspects being the lion or the beast, the wild animal, and with kindness, gentleness, and humility, form a loving relationship with that beast, or the parts of you that you hate, fear, despise, or ashamed of. And in this image, you'll notice the nurturing aspects of the mother, and it has the sign of eternity above that. And in some ways, this represents in what Buddhists call the the self, the eternal self, that which is aware of all of consciousness and reality, that which is always silent, that's aware, that's the king of the chariot in some ways, that's lovingly aware of every thought, every emotion that you have, and the ability to form a relationship with the beast is actually the ultimate form of accepting yourself for who you are right now. This self-acceptance for whatever's happening in one's life, may there be a death of a loved one, a long-term illness, all the extensive, uncomfortable thoughts and emotions and feelings that you have about your company and your losses and your employees, these are all subjectively contained in the symbol of the beast. And knowing that in this life you will never reach perfection as much as you strive, that partly, and if not mostly, the fight is actually mostly with your beasts that you have. That life is always, whatever has happened in your life and whatever decisions you've made, you've managed to overcome them, and you're here right now. And this COVID period will be done, and this period in our business will be done with time. But if we can end the fight with ourselves and we can work with our fear, feel them, embody that they're not dangerous, they're ourselves. When you have a part of yourself, when you're fighting yourself, it means that you have a part of yourself that you do not like, and that's okay to not like something, but it is part of you, and you have to accept it. We have to learn to love ourselves, and it's only difficult in loving the parts that we hate the most in ourselves. And if we can resolve that fight, and if we can actually realize that the fight, the beast, is a gift for us, because in overcoming it, in transcending it, in that part of the aspect of our ego of being integrated into our personalities, we're able to move with more responsibility, more care, and more capacity in life. We can take on more. But if our beast overcomes us, and I see this with many entrepreneurs, and they don't have a single employee, they're self-employed, they're earning, let's say, 20,000 Rand a month, and they're starting out, but their anxiety levels are at their peak all the time. It's very hard to grow revenue, grow in vision, become growth-orientated and learning-orientated, because you're at the peak of your capacity. So somehow the purpose of your venture and the beast are intertwined, in that the stronger you get, weirdly enough, the beast becomes stronger too. So your capacity now, if you think about your trials and tribulations when you were a teenager, when mommy or daddy took away your device or your toy, versus your trials and tribulations in your 20s to now, you're dealing with right now the highest level of complexity and pain that you're able to deal with. But it doesn't mean you can't handle bigger things. And the more we reconcile that beast, the more we love it, the more we put our hand into its mouth and tame it, is the greater to the degree that we're able to grow. And the beast doesn't grow, it doesn't go, it grows with you. It's your companion for life. The more powerful you become, the more powerful the beast comes. So at this, we're coming towards the end of this session, and in a lot of my work, I share a lot of contemporary movies, because I think Hollywood movies contain some of these battles and what we sometimes call in psychology the hero's journey, which was made famous by Joseph Campbell. And what often I didn't realize when I was younger is I was watching these amazing battles, between good and evil and these two characters. But what I didn't ever do is superimpose those characters as not something external to them, but actually them themselves. So I want to share two, which represents the battle quite beautifully and the overcoming of the battle. The first comes from the Matrix movies. I don't know if you folks love the Matrix movies. You can chat and say if you watch them. There are two main characters, especially in the first couple Matrix movies. There's Neo, played by Keanu Reeves, and Mr. Anderson. who is the, I guess, part of the Matrix. He's the protagonist, I think you call them in movies. He is the evil one, where Keanu Reeves is the is this enlightened being that's supposed to save humanity. And what happens with Neo is he starts out naive and just an employee in a company, and suddenly he starts to build in power and starts to take. I'm glad everyone's loving the Matrix movie, so we'll get this. So what ends up happening is he starts to build his strength, and he starts to tackle more and more complex fights, and he starts to build in strength. And as he becomes stronger and stronger, what you'll notice in the movies is that Mr. Anderson becomes stronger and stronger, and Mr. Anderson starts to replicate into millions of them. And anyway, there's this final battle, and I want you to look at this final battle, because what happens is I'm showing you the end of the battle because it's quite long, and basically they've been hitting each other forever, and he's hit so many Mr. Andersons and knocked them out that he's growing tired. But I want you to imagine that this is not Mr. Anderson as a separate enemy, that this is yourself, that Mr. Anderson is the dark aspect of yourself that was the most important thing, growth in his strength to become who Neo would be in the future Matrix movies. And there's a part of this that I want you to notice what he does in the end when the fight ends. There's something he does. He stops the fight. And I want you to notice how he stops the fight in this movie clip. And then I want to show you how in another movie clip, the fight is won in the end. And they show a literally different aspects. So I'm testing something with you folks. I hope it works. Let me know if it works. But please watch this in your own. I will set this up. Make it full screen.
This is my world! My world! Wait. I've seen this. This is the end. You were laying right there, just like that. I stand here, right here. I'm supposed to say something. Everything that has a beginning has an end. What did I just say? This isn't right. This can't be right. Get away from me! What are you afraid of? It's a trick. You're right, sir.
Okay, so I'm hoping that what I wanted to add a new layer to this, what might have some people might have not noticed with that series, was that Neo, at some point after gaining all his strength, he met Mr. Anderson in this final battle. And this is symbolic to meeting yourself in your final battle. And it might be a particular fear you have. It might be something you've been working on that's been repeating itself for many, many years. And at some point, the human personality accepts and stops the fight against that part of themselves, and then actually merges with Mr. Anderson. And in the merging, he transcends that battle in the matrix. And strangely enough, you think, in contemporary personal development, you would think, okay, now he's won and he's going to live happily ever after. No, he just unplugs out of that reality and moves to a higher reality, not in the matrix, but where the machines live. And now there's a bigger enemy, which is the machines, which then continues the matrix. And above all of this, if people have watched the whole trilogy, they see at the end that the owner of the matrix, being the dark side represented, and the Oracle are actually good old friends watching the sunset. So I wanted to share that because it's wonderfully symbolic. And I've got one last piece, and we'll come to the end of the session to leave you with, which is also a contemporary video. And I hope this session has been useful to you folks. We will be sharing a survey, and we'll be sharing the video with you. We'll take a couple questions if we can at the end of this, but I hope this was supportive. This is one last version of the battling with oneself that's in a Disney movie. And I want you to notice So, folks, I wanted to share that last video too, because, and this is a kind of a final and leaving message for everyone during this very turbulent time. All of us are battling our demons and enemies and our dark sides, our pains, our judgments. And the most redeeming thing I think that we can all do for ourselves is be caring for ourselves in the midst of all the pain. And as Liesl mentions in her question, show forgiveness to yourself and others for all of their wounds that comes up, because ultimately all of human behavior that is destructive comes from that place, that part of ourselves that we don't accept, we can't love, our fears, our wounds. And I hope during this time that you can give yourself a warm place to hold yourself and your families. I hope this period can be redemptive for your businesses. And I hope that with that warm blanket and that care for yourself, you can then take that mindset, that awareness of both of your light and dark, and bring that into your business to make decisions that are not from a place of war and fight, but just from a place of gentleness, from a bit of quietude, whatever you can give yourself. If you can't manage to, that's okay too. We all do our best. And yeah, and that's the end for this. I hope this was a useful period for you. We will send you a little survey. Part of our intention is to obviously see if you like this material, if this could form part of our e-learning suite that we might want to share. There's so much I can share. This is just a small part. And yeah, I think ultimately, I think this deserves probably a series. And I also want to figure out on the survey, we've got a closed social network that we've got for our African entrepreneurs online, if this even deserves a section on it for resilience. So yeah, I hope this was very supportive. We'll send out those surveys. Even if one of those slides made a difference for you and you can feel a little bit more calm during this period and a little bit more caring, yeah, I hope you all look after yourselves and families during this time, and that this time may be redeeming. So have a wonderful rest of your day, and thank you for all your efforts and all your time, and we'll be in touch soon. And thank you to Yvonne for all your support, Yvonne.